Today, Secretary Rollins announced the Trump administration is awarding $280 million in emergency relief for the farmers and ranchers of South Texas. Farmers and ranchers that have been harmed by the water crisis here, a water crisis that is caused by Mexico's refusal to comply with the 1944 water treaty. This is an issue I've been fighting in the Senate for a long time. In December of last year, I authored the legislation as part of the continuing resolution that directed the administration to give this emergency relief to the farmers and ranchers in South Texas. And
for the first time that we can think of, we have a Secretary of Agriculture right here in South Texas, right here listening firsthand to the needs and the concerns of our South Texas farming community. That being said, I am humbled to represent this region, and when I first became elected in 2022, the number one issue that was affecting our South Texas communities was the 1944 and is the 1944 water treaty and the lack of compliance by the Mexican government.
I know a lot of people are feeling scared right now about the executive order that was signed today about the Department of Education, and we also want you to know that every single day we are in the fight to defend our communities, to defend the institutions that serve our communities, including our schools. I'm a public school kid myself, and to make sure that we hold this administration accountable.
And he's bullying every other student in North Carolina, taking away $1.1 billion from their education. Unfortunately, as a teacher of 40 years, I know firsthand how you handle bullies. You don't cuddle them. You don't reward their behavior. You address it head on. And that's exactly what we're going to do. The bullying in chief's executive order is blatantly unconstitutional.
Wouldn't you think that education ought to be the one thing that we all ought to agree on? And every kid should get a good education regardless of what their zip code is. But when you got to slash and burn, that's the results.
That's why we don't need a Department of Education, because it's not concentrating on what we should do, which is making sure that our students read and write and know arithmetic. That's what we should be concentrating.
I'm talking about cuts to Medicaid and food programs. I'm talking about cuts to veterans and health care. That doesn't just affect Democrats. That affects everyone across the political spectrum who I have the honor representing. And so I think wanting to see Democrats stand their ground when this administration is doing dangerous things is common sense.
And they said we wouldn't get a Speaker of the House in the first vote, we did. They said we wouldn't pass a reconciliation resolution out of the House, we did. And they said we wouldn't be able to pass a continuing resolution, which actually helps to reverse the trend by lowering government spending while fully funding all of the critical functions of government that we need. We were able to pass that out of the House.
It's holy anger that we got to harness together to get the job done.
Yeah, look, this is a really exciting opportunity here in Weirton where we're going to be making transformers, right? With electrical steel, there's a huge backlog in this country and around the world on transformers. And these are going to be American made here in Weirton. So the growth trajectory of this is huge, far beyond the level of workers that you had that were producing tin here at this plant.
That means the products that we buy almost every single day, from fruits and vegetables to electronics and even cars, their prices are going to go up. And it's not just consumers who pay the price. Think about farmers, manufacturers, small business owners. They get impacted too. To put it simply, these Donald Trump tariffs do nothing to bring down costs.
So that is, I think of tariffs, if you institute tariffs in a smart, strategic way and you combine it with investments in domestic manufacturing, it actually could be a very powerful tool to keep American jobs at home. So it's not like all tariffs are bad all the time. But if you just do random sweeping tariffs and you do it on Canada and Mexico, and then what happens is it becomes a tax on consumers. Because the tariff is being collected by the government so that they can pay for the $4.5 trillion tax cut.
Look, Trump, Musk, and the Republicans are cutting vital programs that benefit the American people to make room for big tax cuts for the ultra wealthy, people like Elon Musk. And on the floor of the Senate, we tried to set up guardrails to protect important investments. I offered an amendment, simple idea. It said, keep your hands off of funding for the kids' school lunch program and breakfast programs. And I'm quoting, while home building is inherently domestic, builders rely on components produced abroad, with Canada and Mexico representing nearly 25% of building materials imports. Imposing additional tariffs on these imports will lead to higher material costs, which will ultimately be passed on to home buyers in the form of increased housing prices, unquote. That's a pretty simple statement of supply and demand, is it not, Doctor? Yes, Senator. Right. So, when we hear the president, talking about beautiful tariffs, I think the American people need to understand what he's talking about, if applied in a broad-based way, mean higher housing costs. Isn't that right? So when you fire the IGs as your first step, what you're doing is opening the door to waste, fraud, and abuse. And that abuse is what we are seeing right now, because Elon Musk and his DOGE cronies are not trying to make the government more efficient. What they are doing is slashing important services that benefit all Americans and trying to rig the government to do the bidding of people like Elon Musk.
Well, normally the course of action, of course, is if you got a bad decision from a judge, you got the appellate courts and you appeal. But I do think in this one case with Judge Boasberg, this guy who told think about it, Larry. This judge said, turn the plane around, bring back the hardened gang member criminals who've done terrible things, who are in the country illegally, bring him back to the United States. Maybe the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So
he is attempting an autocratic takeover of our government and attempting to shift us away from a representative democracy to an oligarchy. And I think we need to call that out very directly.
Their best defense, Panetta said, is the courts.
Time in which they are really going to be the number one entity that continues to push back on this administration, especially when it comes to our federal employees, especially when it comes to due process, especially when it comes to ensuring that our system of checks and balances stands strong.
Pushback from local Republicans who say the federal government spends way too much, and payroll is a large part of that.
If you have those sentiments and you are protesting the very country that has allowed you the privileges to study in the United States, that is under the full jurisdiction of the United States State Department and the president to revoke said visa. Now, I know that we can get into a further conversation about legal permit residents, green card holders, et cetera, but let's not forget, he came here on a student visa. And for many of the students that are on campus on these visas that are protesting the very country that has welcomed them with open arms, they are now becoming foot soldiers for these terror organizations. These are terrorist sympathizers. They have no place in our country.
And what you are seeing right now is a president who is authoritarian. He just attacked the media the other day. I think he called CNN illegal because I gather that now and then you criticize him. He is trying to encroach on the constitutional responsibilities and spending powers of Congress. And now he's going after the courts. Look, if somebody is a corrupt judge, that person can and should be impeached. But not because you voiced an opinion. That's why these guys have life terms. So they are immune from these types of attack, and they can be objective in their judgment.
So I thank you all for having me here today to celebrate with our children, to show our children that they not only can dream big, but they can achieve big. And that is what we're doing today. We are crafting out a new community, a new state, but a new America that includes everyone, where all of our children can thrive despite where they start.
This is the list of the 13 high schools with 0 students who tested proficient in math. That is 40% of Baltimore's public high schools. The story doesn't end there. At Baltimore's top 5 public high schools in math proficiency, only 92 students tested proficient out of 809. So at the best public high schools in that city, just 11.4% of students are proficient in math.
We believe that America's overall education performance and rank in the world, and the data bears this out, was significantly higher before the Department of Education. So one has to wonder that in the 45 years since the Department of Education has existed, what have we gotten for it? The data will show you It has gotten a significant amount of spending for the bureaucrats in Washington, a significant amount of spending for administrators across the entire country.
Our schools are failing our kids. That's just the status quo of where we're at in America. And what we can see here is education funding from the federal government has gone up. Student performance has been flat, and compared to other nations has actually gone down.
Fully 70% of 8th graders and 4th graders can't even read at grade level. If you can't read, you can't learn.
Education is the foundation to success in our country. We've got to stop Donald Trump. We've got to make sure we invest in our kids' education and their success. Democrats have to come together. Let's stop these cuts. Let's fight for a better future for our kids.
When you wipe out funding in the way that's being proposed, you are truly going to disenfranchise a lot of us and take away our ability to provide that tailored need to our educational communities.
And that's what we're all about in school. We're here for students.
I really implore folks to support public education across the state of Hawaii and certainly across the country.
But the notion that you will just abolish the Department of Education, which means what we're going to see are higher class sizes, right? More students in classes, teachers will be overwhelmed, students won't be able to get the individualized attention that they need. Children with disabilities are going to be jammed up. After school programs, academic enrichment programs.
I've been on bills for the last 3 or 4 Congresses that would do away with the Department of Education, but Congress has to act, and we can do that through the reconciliation bill. So we don't need 60 votes in the Senate to do it, but this has to be part of the budget reconciliation bill. When that gets passed and we go through the tax package and we have that one big, beautiful bill that's going to go over to the Senate from the House, this should be in there to do away with the Department of Education.
It would mean children foregoing life-saving care because their families are taken off of their insurance. Medicaid is part of the fabric of our communities, whether we realize it or not. We all have loved ones who depend on Medicaid for care and services to directly improve their lives. We have to keep speaking out, raising the alarm for those who will suffer if these cuts to Medicaid go through, and we need to continue amplifying those stories. We have to keep fighting as if people's lives depend on it, because they do. We heard from 2 patients today, Joel and Linda, who talked about the impact that it would have on the care that they receive.
As the CEO, Jennifer DiCabella, said, this is an existential moment for Hennepin Healthcare and other healthcare providers in our community. This is not just about people who get their healthcare through Medicaid. This is about all of us. We are all going to be harmed if these cuts go through.
House Democrats held a Medicaid Day of Action. Some Senate Democrats joined us. Some governors across the country joined us as well. But there were in-person engagements, town hall meetings, site visits to nursing homes or hospitals or community health clinics, press conferences all across the country to lift up our fight to protect Medicaid from the largest cut in American history that House Republicans, Senate Republicans, and Donald Trump's are trying to jam down the throats of the American people. I know you held an event yesterday. Could you tell us about it?
Sure. We did a community conversation with a focus on Medicaid and had Dr. Shapiro come out to talk about the impacts Medicaid would have.
I feel an obligation to do it, to call out the lawlessness of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, to let them know that we are working what I call the 4 C's. In the courts to go against this attack on the Constitution and the rule of law.
This is what it is to have engagement, listening to your constituents. Republicans are too afraid to do town halls. We're going to continue to do them, not just here in the district, but traveling this country to make sure that everybody is heard across the country.
If that's what it takes to keep our borders safe, then yeah, that's what it takes to keep our borders safe. I think that a lot of what he's done already, policy, et cetera, has taken care of a lot of the issues at the southern border. But if the President and the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of Defense feel that additional measures are needed in order to protect our borders, then so be it.
We built this incredible thing, the 8th wonder of the world, right?
You know, it connects two oceans, and one ocean is substantially higher than the other. We should have never given it. But we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama. And now Panama has gone out and essentially ceded it to China. And until they ripped all the signs down about a week ago, when they saw that I was serious about this, you know, most of the signs were written in Chinese. They were all Chinese all over the place. That wasn't the deal. We're taking the Panama Canal back.
The instrument that I've introduced basically will force the agencies to cut existing regulations. So if they introduce new regulation that's $100 million or more, they actually have to cut regulations that are that size instead of layer upon layer of additional regulations. And it's killing our small businesses. When we go across the country and we talk to these small business owners, they'll tell us we spend more of our time checking boxes than we actually do being able to provide a product or being able to provide a service.
This is a district court judge that is usurping the executive's authority to conduct not only the foreign policy of the United States, but to attempt unconstitutionally to stop the executive from repelling an invasion. These are powers that the Commander-in-Chief of the United States has both under Article 2 of the Constitution.